Okay. So let's kick it off. Thank you everyone for joining us today in this session. And I'm Valery Lakin, Director of Product. With me today here is Eliezer Sikoriansky, our Product Manager, leading the feature of dashboards capabilities for SafeBreach. Is going to presenting to us today the different use cases and capabilities. I just want to mention that this is kind of the first session in the series of sessions, product-led webinars, specifically focused on capabilities and diving deeper in some interesting use cases and capabilities within the product. So we'll keep in touch with you guys and follow up with additional webinars and new capabilities. So with that, I'll pass over to Eliezer.
Yes, thank you. The beginning of a lot of good things to come from the product team here at SafeBreach. Okay, so right here, you can submit any questions that you have via the Q&A function down in the chat. And with that, I will go on and briefly talk about the agenda. So we're going to answer some questions around the dashboards that we have here in the SafeBreach platform. Why are dashboards needed? What are the benefits and who can use them? And when talking about who uses these dashboards, we're going to talk about the different personas and different needs that arise when using the dashboards, and for the benefit for multiple layers and organizations. And then we'll go into the live demo, and we're going to portray those demos, those use cases that I'll talk about in the slides, and then we'll finish off with a Q&A where we can answer some of the questions from the chat. So why dashboards? Using the SafeBreach platform, you know that you generate lots of simulation data. Lots of simulation data is not easy to comprehend without some built on top of it intelligence, and that's exactly what we tried to do with the dashboards feature. We wanted to enable people with three main things, which are visualizing the data that they have, analyzing and reporting. So when we talk about visualization, we talk about a centralized point of visibility across teams and stakeholders in an organization where different people can come and see the same data and same testing results. When analyzing data, you want to find security gaps and you want to try to understand where you are not protected and where some certain threats, for example, can expose you to some security risks. So the dashboards help in identify gaps efficiently, and they allow you to also analyze and visualize trends of your security testing and posture over time with easy visualizations. And last but not least is the importance of adding and the importance of sharing this knowledge across multiple stakeholders and teams in the organization, because the knowledge that you can obtain from all the simulations and testing that you do in your company is valuable, and reporting and providing visibility to teams and management is very important, because we know how cybersecurity is now very prevalent in many discussions, from security analysts all the way to the board. Visibility is very paramount. So visualizing, analyzing, and reporting is big factors and main drivers for this feature. Different personas, different needs. Now, not everybody looks at security the same way, and not everybody needs the same level of detail. And different eyes need different needs. When we talk about the personas, and we talk about the questions that they might ask and what they would like to see on a specific report that they have. For example, a board of directors could ask, what is our security risk? What is the impact of a specific threat that can emerge, and what will it have, what kind of effect will it have on the business? So for a board of directors that are not very security oriented and very technical, a high level point of view is important for them. The same comes for the CISO or any C-level security persona. And the questions that they can add are, what is our security control performance? What is our ROI good? And also, the level of technicality is not as deep as we will see for other questions. And the blue team can ask the same question, but they would also ask something a little bit more technical, as how is our mitral posture? And they would go into specific TTPs and understand, are these techniques, are those sub-techniques covered? And how is our posture against a specific behavior that an adversary can have? And then we have even more technical questions that can come from red teams or threat intelligence teams, and they want to know exposure, and they want to know performance around a specific threat also, which is very important. And for them, the level of detail and reports that would be interesting are much more in-depth and technical. And so what are some of the questions that the different use cases can bring with them? And it's very interesting. We're going to talk about 3 main use cases, and we'll go over the 3 of them, and then we'll show in the dashboards during a live demo how they physically work. So the executive view is a view, and it's a dashboard, and it's a sort of way to visualize the data to answer high-level questions that are more executive suited, like what is our overall security posture? They want to know specific KPIs. Are we improving over time? What is our MITRE coverage? Are our controls operating the way they are? We need numbers, and these are high-level questions that do not require a very deep point of visibility. And some ROI questions. Are our controls efficient? Is there an overlap in tools? And these are questions that management needs for business decisions and a resource allocation and so forth. And going a little bit deeper, we have an operational use case where we have the SafeBreach operator using the platform, and he's interested in analyzing the vast testing data that we have. And there's lots of data that we have. If you've ever seen the results page, you know that there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of simulations, and they need to understand where the gaps are. They need to understand how to prioritize things. And that's how dashboards can help them bring in some more intelligence on top of that result testing data. So the questions that they will ask are, where are the gaps? Is our security setup performing the way that we want it to perform? And of course, they want to share this data with other people, because sharing this knowledge is very important and beneficial to the security setup and risk of the company. So collaborating that breach and attack simulation results with other teams and reporting the posture to management to answer those questions that the executive might have. And the third use case that I want to show how the dashboard can help is the threat-driven workflow. So we know that a lot of emerging threats and persistent threats are out there in the wild, and they target specific, whether it be industries or companies from multiple countries. And what we want to do in the SafeBreach platform is enable a process of understanding how a threat can affect an organization and how exposed a company is security-wise with the dashboards. And we'll show that in the demo now. So part of the workflow would be to execute an emerging threat test. We want to view the posture against a specific threat. We want to model it against a framework. MITRE is very profound, and it's very prevalent in modeling behavior of adversaries. And we can do that with the dashboards also. And then we want to analyze the security gaps. And this is how the dashboards can help you in these 3 different use cases. And these are not all the use cases, of course, but this is something to try to showcase the capabilities that we have around this feature. So with these 3 use cases being said, I'm going to go into the platform, and I'm going to show how each of them can easily be utilized within the platform. So just for a second, I'm going to share a different screen. Can you now see the platform page?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, amazing. So I want to talk about the executive use case that we talked about, and that's going into the dashboards and understanding that overall posture. So what we advise and what multiple customers do is they try to model their organization's posture around a specific test. And what we did here in this environment is we created a baseline test. A baseline test consists of attacks that cover multiple attack phases and techniques across email to malware drop to infiltration, exfiltration, and lateral movement. And it's sort of subset of the many attacks that we have, thousands of attacks that we have in the platform, to build a baseline test that can be run continuously. Here we can see that it's scheduled to run weekly, and to continuously understand where we are in a baseline perspective in terms of security. So we're going to look at the last test that we ran. The baseline test should be here. Here we go. So here we have a test summary. We have the test summary that shows the results that were happening there, that we had within the test. the breakdown of the simulations. We can historically see other tests that we executed, for example. You can see other security events and so forth. But what we want to do is we want to use the call to actions feature to go to the dashboards. Here we can select which dashboard we want to show, and we want to populate the security posture dashboard, which is more of an example of an executive high-level dashboard that provides visibility to in a not very deep, technical way. And we're going to add here status filter to see only relevant simulations. Okay, now we don't have to pick a specific test. If we want to look at all the tests combined to get even a bigger picture across multiple executions that we had, we can select the plan, and we can also select the baseline plan. And this will combine all of our tests together to provide a better picture, and you can also track the performance of this baseline test over time. So we can see that we're pretty consistent in our security posture in a 1 month time frame. We can go into a deeper time frame and see over 3 months and so forth. And in some occasions, in some different tests, you'll see fluctuations in specific areas that might bring up attention and provide insight into when things are changing for the worse or for the better, depending on the efforts you provide or you do with your security teams. So as an executive looking at this dashboard, we see a high-level view of the simulation results that we have. We have the overall status breakdown showing that we have most of our simulations are being stopped, and some of them are being detected or even prevented by some security controls. We can easily see and identify points that might interest us as an executive. For example, looking at the security control category that provide a perspective in terms of the security controls that we have, the network access, network inspections, and so forth. Email gateways are stopping most of the malicious simulations that we have, but it's easy to see that our endpoint controls here are failing in comparison to other security controls, and this might bring up some questions and try to somehow focus our efforts as a security team and to try to test and understand how do we improve our posture around endpoint. Not only you can see your business units, but what's better is once you understand and identify that a specific network category or any label that you see here is of interest to you, you can simply click on the label and drill down the whole dashboard to focus on that specific part of your security posture that is interesting to you. Taking a look now, we are filtered to the security control category of endpoint. We're now focusing only on the endpoint simulations that we ran. You can see how different business units, now these different business units are different segments, sets of deployments that help us structure our organization to see how they're performing and to tackle security different around the deployment of an organization. You can see how different offices or areas are performing, and this is very easy to identify and to somehow direct personnel to fix and remediate these gaps. But first, to understand these gaps, you need to take a different approach and become a little bit more technical and dive deep into these simulations to understand where your gaps are. So an executive, a CISO, for example, can take a look at this picture, understand where his gaps are, try to direct effort from his team to investigate, to identify security gaps. He can take a look at the security controls over those business units and so forth. So, for example, if a CISO is now looking and understanding that his endpoint needs more attention, he can, first of all, ask his team or his security operator to take a look. But he can also, what's interesting is he can schedule, for example, he can schedule this to himself, and I'll go ahead and schedule this to myself to show you. And he can say, I want to now receive an update on a weekly basis to see how my team progresses as they now start to investigate endpoint controls and see where we're and to see if we're improving in any way. So let's say I save this and set this. I want this to be sent to me every Sunday or every end of the week, because I know my team works from Monday to Thursday or Friday. And I'm going to set this, and I'm going to receive an update to my email with a report on the status of this specific view that I just created. And you can go ahead and save this view, and then you'll receive reports for the specific view the layout that you selected, and it'll work. Here we go. We just saved the view, and this will be the exact layout that you will receive in the PDF to your email. Now, as a security analyst, so this is the high-level view that a CISO can understand. You can see how his the ROI of his security controls. You can see his global security posture, and he can also, as we said, KPIs is also something interesting. Now that endpoint is a KPI, and we want to see the percentage of missed simulations going down, he can now track this on a weekly basis by the report coming into his email. Now, as a security operator that would want to do the same operation, but from a different perspective, and take a look at a little bit more technical around the baseline. So as I've showed you before, you can also open a test summary of a baseline test and go to the dashboards. But there's another way to do this. You can also go to the dashboards. You can select the specific dashboard that you want to know. So as a security control validation is not the one. We want to go to the security test analysis. And of course, you can customize and build any dashboard that you want. And you can add widgets and you can modify them. And these are some use cases that we created to portray the capabilities. So as a security operator now entering this dashboard, he wants to focus on the baseline plan that was identified as a bit problematic, that showed us problematic areas. And we can also already see that we see the same insights that we saw from the security posture dashboard. We see that the endpoint security control category is also problematic. But and we want to focus on this. So as we did before, we're going to click on endpoint, and we're going to see how the attacks also are filtered and focused on specific attacks that only endpoint consists of. Save the view. Now, what's interesting here is automatically we can now, with the help of a different view of widgets, we can dive into the attack types and some specific simulators that are more at risk to endpoint TTPs or IOCs, and this allows us to focus and understand where we need to invest our efforts. So, as a security operator of the platform, what you can do now is you can even, now that we filter to endpoint, you can focus on a specific set of simulators. For example, the corporate users. You can filter even deeper to understand what are the simulations that are constituting this data set of missed or not blocked simulations. So by clicking on a data set, you will automatically receive all the simulations. And this set of simulations can help you understand where you need to apply remediation. You can take a look at your security controls to understand which ones are preventing and which ones are having no action, for example. You can also see the events that are being prevented to see that you are having a specific ROI, and prevented meaning that there is a security control that is blocking them. So you can see where your security controls are effective and where they need attention. But what's interesting here is the element of sharing data. So what the security operator wants to do, he wants to find those gaps. He wants to understand what specific simulations can be attended to. Here we're focusing on data collection. For corporate users, this is, for example, a use case that is very relevant in organization. You can click and open the simulations to see which attacks are problematic and are exposing or helping adversaries exploit our setups. And what's interesting here is that you can export the CSV and then share all this technical data with relevant teams that can then remediate and close any gaps that are available. We can see the number. We can see the attacks, and we can see which attacks is exploiting our systems the most. So this is what you do as a security operator, and as we showed here that you can find the gaps effectively, and then you can share the data with other teams and pretty easily. And we see how it very easily focused on the minimal set of attacks that we can now tackle. As a KPI, we know that these 6 attacks are something that we want to remediate and we want to proof ourselves against. You have a list of attacks here, and it allows you to gradually fix them in return and see the effect that it's having on your environment, and then selecting maybe a different type of attack type to tackle. And of course, with a report being sent every week to the executive, he will now see the incremental improvement that we're having on the security posture of the organization. Here, this one. And it's very easy to select and visualize where you want to focus your efforts. So here it's easy to see that malware drop, and effectively finding all these attacks and remediating them will provide the most effort, but that's up for the security operator to decide. And Dashboards allows you to in a flexible manner, to understand where the gaps are and choose how to operate. Okay, now for the last use case, we're going to look at what we talked about was the threat workflow. So Dashboards allows you to also model around the threat and understand how exposed you are in regards to a specific threat. And threats can be executed via plans, via known reports, and they can easily also be executed from the playbook. And we're going to focus on APT 29 for this use case. So all you have to do to execute relevant attacks and to test your posture against them is to filter for the relevant threat group here. We're going to select APT 29. We have a list of attacks. You can easily select all of them. And then you can run on all simulators. You can select the simulators you want to run on. You can even create a plan, save it, and then automate it for continuous evaluation going forward. If you know that this is a persistent threat that is relevant to your company, that's something you can do. And once the simulations, of course, these simulations have already been executed here on this environment, as the threat hunter, you can go back to the dashboards, go to the threat assessment dashboard, which is more oriented around a MITRE framework, attack phases, and the security controls. Here it's already filtered, but you can always go ahead and filter for any threat group that you're currently focused on. And the simulations are now filtered to the specific attacks of that threat. And here, you have to almost be blind in a way to not understand that your host level is totally exposed to this threat. And this is somehow connected, as we've seen, to the initial identification that the CISO made around endpoint and the effects that were and the direction of effort that the management wanted from the security teams to help with the endpoints and improve the security around there. We can also see that because our company is lacking or is not bulletproof against endpoint security, we can see that this threat is specifically more effective around host level. And the dashboards allows you to visualize this easily and, of course, pinpoint and dive deep into that specific use case that is now interesting. Here we can see how on a consistent basis where our host level is being very exposed to this specific threat. We can see MITRE techniques and MITRE tactics to allow us to understand where we need to focus ourselves and what is most interesting. You can select and you can visualize specific attacks if you want to see what are the attacks that are consisting of this data set, creating service and so forth. That is something that you might need to focus on. If you want to drill down into a specific MITRE tactic, you can also do that. Here we're going to take a look at the execution phase, MITRE tactic, excuse me. We're going to try to understand how we can provide this knowledge to the organization as a threat hunter and say, where can we help and what can we fix around this? So what we see here is we see a lot of again, those corporate users are very exposed to this threat. We can see security controls that are not performing and providing no action. And we can see some insights also for remediation. Now, as saying we want to focus on a specific MITRE technique, you can also filter by any MITRE technique that you want. And then you can even add even more in-depth MITRE widgets to focus on sub-techniques and so forth. You can create your own if you want. You have all of the relevant fields and so forth. You can go into MITRE sub-techniques and add that other layer of depth if needed. And then we can take a look at some of the simulations and see why our endpoint isn't protecting us against this threat. Clicking on this data, we'll have some of the detected simulations, but maybe we can find one that we can modify something into an alert because we want to alert around this threat. So here we see some of the events happening from the simulation. But we can see some of the events happening in the simulation, but there might be something more interesting. Here we have other security events, and then we can find some also malicious activity that might help us. But for this specific, these specific simulations, we're not finding anything. Here we go. Here, for example, we can see a suspicious sequence of exploration activities. This is an event that we would want to mark and use and maybe create an alert around this. So we see how the dashboards allows you to pinpoint specific attacks that allow you to create alerts and proof yourself against specific threats. So creating, for example, a alert around this specific event can help you understand that a specific threat is being now exploited or is being used against the organization. And that's how you would use the dashboards to help yourself understand your exposure and mitigate yourself against a threat group. Okay. So what we showed here was we showed how a CISO, I want to summarize this for a second. To summarize, we showcased here how flexible visibility can enable different users with the levels of details needed for them. In addition, sharing findings with other teams and enabling relevant stakeholders to track those key points of interest by scheduling continuous reports. So we've seen how different levels of details enable different personas in the organization, and how dashboards can enable on multiple layers of depth, of technical depth, to improve the security posture of a company. Now I'm going to move over to the Q&A era, just a second.
Yeah, actually, I was wondering maybe if you could stay on the demo, if there will be any follow-up questions regarding the dashboard specifically.
Okay.
So thank you, Eliezer, and again, guys, all the attendees who are attending this webinar. Feel free to ask any kind of questions. We'll give a minute or so to get in the questions, and then Eliezer will be able to answer them.
Yeah, just a second. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with the demo again, and then we can answer some questions. All right.
Okay, cool. So there is one question here about something that related to the last thing that you showed regarding the security events. So how are they populated and visualized in dashboards? Could you elaborate a few words about that?
Of course. So our security events are mapped against the simulations that we ran. So each simulation is correlated with specific events that are identified via whether it be direct integrations against the vendor or via SIEM. We correlate our simulations that we have to security events that happen, and then we bring in the simulations that are correlated, and we map them to the specific vendor or product that is depending on the visualization that you created. For example, here we're seeing security events against specific products, but it doesn't have to be products. You can always edit a widget and select a vendor, or you can go and just see the statuses themselves. So here we wanted to portray the vendors, and this is how we visualize the events. So you can easily see all the simulations that are protected. For example, we can go and dive into the security events and see that it wasn't the right Emotet malware written to this was mitigated by SentinelOne, and so you can easily identify good performance and bad performance of security controls. And yeah, that's how we populate the security events here in the dashboards.
Okay, thanks. There is another question here about the best practices. What would be our best practices for scheduling tests and running them continuously? Like what would be in terms of the period of time for testing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it depends on your organization and how small of intervals you can run. And some tests require can require IT approval, and depending on the company, change management requests might need to be approved also. But in regards, and what we have here, we run baseline tests weekly on our environment. We've seen customers run them monthly, and we've seen customers run plans every hour also. So it really depends on your company vision. And we would advise to run a baseline tests on a weekly basis to understand. We would advise to build plans around specific alerts or specific things that you know are relevant to you on a daily basis to identify drift. You can monitor them with overtime visualizations to see if any changes or drift is happening in your organization. You can basically add any test that you want at any interval, and they will all.
Yeah, I do agree with you. It's really a kind of depending on the use case. So basically, testing a specific threat, let's say a next WannaCry or next emerging threat, it could be a good thing to test it once. But then if you see that you'd like to follow up, then scheduling that continues. So that's a good approach.
Exactly.
Here. Okay, so here's another question that I had actually. So you showed in the dashboards that we can visualize the results of different simulations. How about additional information that we have in the platform, like insights and vulnerabilities and stuff like that? Is it possible to visualize them?
Yes. So you might be familiar with other pages that we have in the platform, like the insights page that provides you your specific insight cards to how to mitigate attacks in respect to a specific test. And so these data sources are also available in the dashboards. Currently, we support only insights as an additional data source to complement the simulation results that we have here. And vulnerabilities is something that we will add in the near future. I'll show you an example. In one of the dashboards here on the bottom, we have a remediation insights table, which shows you which insight cards are available for the data that you're currently looking on. And depending on the plan and test, you'll have different insights that will just understand what you can mitigate. And they will show you. So this is the same data that we're seeing in the insights page. And we also have insights as a data source where you can create visualizations around insights. So you can also create and understand how your insights, for example, are, you can see a breakdown of them by importance and so forth. So insights is the data source that we're adding now and enhancing as we're going forward. And vulnerabilities will be a data source that we will add in the near future. So we will be able, in a single dashboard, understand how your results are performing, what insights you have for remediation, and you'll also see the vulnerabilities that are affected or that are exposed all in one view.
Nice. Okay. Thank you, Laser. I believe we don't have any other questions right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to summarize, if you get any follow-up for us, you can find us in the SafeBreach.com website, as well as contact us or customer success that is assigned to you for any more details or sessions. We're also happy to jump on a call with you if you have any kind of questions going forward, what's this plan, etc. So we can, as a product team, jump on that session as well and share our knowledge with you guys. Eliezer, thank you so much for this session. It was great.
All right. Yeah, I want to say thank you to everyone that joined also. And stay tuned for upcoming webinars from the product team on any additional features that might help you and improve your posture.
Okay. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much.